Ladies and gentlemen of the intellectual conclave, gather around as we delve into the labyrinthine symposium of destiny's recent colloquy with actual justice warrior, AJW, debating the moral quandaries of our current extremely online generation.
He's a nice guy. Oh, I don't think I talked about this today, but I talked about it a little bit last night on stream. My issue with debating Sean, I realized this. I told people on my kick stream this last night, but my issue with debating Sean is I realized this after the conversation. For some reason, he's a very difficult person to debate. I've always known this, but I don't consider him to be like exceptionally well-researched, right? I'm not saying he's stupid, but I've never thought of like, oh, Sean, he knows so much about these particular topics. But for some reason, his debate prowess always seems to significantly outpace even the perception I have of the amount of knowledge that he has. And then I realized it was too late. I wish I would have realized this halfway through the debate, but it was on retrospection. Once I finished the debate, I realized, like in the most crystallized, discrete form possible, the dissection of his entire debate strategy. And I wish I'd realized this at least halfway through the debate. Although I unintentionally countered some of it without realizing the tactic being employed. But the way that it works basically is you put forth, the thing is, you put forth a general argument, okay? The general argument might be something like red states take in more welfare than blue states. Or it might be something like Biden has a more comprehensive vision for immigration than Trump because he works with other people. Or it might be pulling out of the Iranian nuclear deal was a bad idea. Or it might be any number of these things, right? So you have, I would call this like, I'm being a little bit biased towards myself, but I would call this like a comprehensive argument. So when I say comprehensive argument, what I mean is we can argue from theory. So theory might have to do with like the economic or the or the political theory or whatever. We can argue about the people that represent it. So maybe the political leaders, maybe the voter base. We can argue about the policy itself and the implementation. And then we can argue about the effect, right? So maybe we could, I could use like the CHIPS Act, right? The CHIPS Act might be an example of this. So we could put forth an argument that the CHIPS Act that Biden did was a really effective way to bring some security-sensitive manufacturing back to the United States, right? There's a comprehensive point here, and the point being that there are certain types of protection that we can engage in certain forms of protectionism to protect and encourage certain industries domestically to grow. We see that the Democrats and Biden, and really the entirety of America, is generally for this because we feel like we should be manufacturing semiconductors in the United States for security purposes. We see that Biden implemented the legislation for it. We can look at the implementation of that and then the response, right? How many companies were setting stuff up because of the CHIPS Act or whatever, right? That's a comprehensive thing, okay? So step one is opponent puts forth like a comprehensive argument. And the way that Sean debates is, I wish I would have realized this beforehand, okay? The way that Sean debates is what he does is he finds a hyper pedantic minutia point and then he makes it. The point is it's never a general refutation of the actual argument itself. It's always arguing against either a sub point or no point at all. And then what happens is, and then this is my folly, what happens next is you get caught up debating this sub point that wasn't relevant to the main argument. And then the entire argument becomes about this sub point that you might be right or wrong about, but it doesn't even refute the primary point here. And I realized after the debate that every single argument that Sean made was always like that, all of them. I don't think he made a single comprehensive refutation of any of the arguments I put forward. It was always the most hyper pedantic, stupid shit in the world. So for instance, for the Iran stuff, right? Pulling out of the Iranian deal was bad. His response to that was, oh, well, under Biden, Robert Malley had his security clearance revoked, and that's bad because he might be an Iranian spy. And then, so in my mind, I'm like, okay, I don't know any of this story. This is like, the story broke like a month ago. I don't know any of this. I can't even refute that. But then I get like hung up on like trying to read about it. And it's like, but that's not even actually a refutation to any of my point, right? That's not a refutation. Now, a proper refutation might have been Robert Malley was a compromised negotiator from the United States. And because of him being compromised, the Iranian nuclear deal was bad for A, B, C, D reasons. And because it was bad for those reasons, it's good that Trump pulled out and the effect of him pulling out was good. that would be like a comprehensive refutation, right? Utilizing this piece of knowledge, but it's never that. And yeah, oh my God, this is happening over and over and over and over again. Where it would always be the most like minor fucking point. Like Donald Trump on immigration, he largely failed. He didn't get his money for the wall. He didn't get Mexico to work with us at all. He definitely didn't get any money from them. He had to mobilize the army in a time of emergency to try to do anything. It just largely overall it was a failure, right? What was his response to Biden's immigration policy? Well, Biden and Kamala Harris made two statements. What? It was Biden said, come to the wall, swarm the wall. And that wasn't even the full context of that quote. It had to do with refugee asylum seekers, number one. And then number two, and then he tried to throw out the like 7 million immigrants have crossed the border, which also wasn't true. And I realized that the only reason I could even counter that point was because I know what the approximate numbers of illegal immigrants are in the United States, and 7 million more crossing, even in 3 years, would be huge. But it wasn't. It was 7 million encounters at the border, right? Which is usually how conservatives lie about these points. But yeah, I got super frustrated because but I realized this after the debate. When I went back and I started thinking, over and over again, like, what the fuck is even happening? Why do these feel so difficult? It's because of this, like, refusal to engage with the primary argument, the hyper niche arguments on these minor points that actually aren't even relevant, and then the only being willing to defend those points. And Jesus. I agree with you, but show an example. Well, I named some. Destiny, modern day debate. AJW. I don't want to like rewatch the whole debate, but let's see if we can find it.
They were in office, covering it up.
Okay, I think we're into it here.
Normalizing relations with the people that matter, like Iran, like Syria, like Lebanon, like figuring out what was going on in Palestine. Obviously, the situation in Afghanistan, him, again, kicking the can down the road so we wouldn't have to deal with that.
I think these are all just... These are opening statements? No, I don't think so. This is a foreign policy argument.
And his administration with the Taliban was deplorable, abandoning our Kurdish allies in Syria after they...
I also needed to fixate. I should have focused on one point at a time instead of doing these like comprehensive, like, let's talk about his policy of his approach, his overall policy approaching foreign policy. I should have made him go from example to example as well.
Eliminate ISIS, or at least in parts of Syria, and abandon them to the Turkish army. That was
that Trump?
I'm sorry, not doing anything about Crimea and somehow pretending like he would have stopped.
The Crimea happened in 2014. Who was president? Was that Trump?
I'm sorry.
So that's an example, right? So my argument is Trump says that he would prevent Ukraine from invading, or he would prevent Russia from invading Ukraine, right? I'm like, okay, well, Trump was president for 4 years. He did nothing about Crimea. And then his response to this, well, who was president when Crimea was invaded? That's not a refutation of the argument that Trump did nothing for 4 years while he was president, right? Yeah, that's one example, right? Let's see if I get hung up debating this.
Sorry, did Russia pull all their troops out for the 4 years that Donald Trump was president?
No, but like that happened.
Clearly that didn't matter.
That happened in 2014, and the Trump administration was heavily arming the Ukrainians.
Notice that's another point, right? So he said it happened in 2014, and then he makes another irrelevant point that they were heavily arming the Ukrainians. We've always sold weapons to Ukraine. So this also isn't a refutation of the point.
Yeah,
more so than the Obama administration.
More so than the Obama administration. One, I'm not even 100. I don't know. I don't know the hyper minutia of like what was the funding to Ukraine for every single year, but it's still not a general refutation of the point that Trump didn't do anything. And then there's also the fact that the impeachment thing literally had to do with threatening to withhold aid from Ukraine. But
policy to sell them weapons, but.
Yeah, he ramped that up, even though people were saying that he was...
Well, he ramped that up. He also got impeached for threatening to take it away because they couldn't do investigations on it. Allegedly. Well,
allegedly.
Allegedly. Listen, I heard that was a perfect phone call. I don't know what you're talking about.
He also does this thing that I shouldn't let him do either. But he's a friendly guy. When he makes it, he'll make jokes when he's like clearly in the wrong to like disarm owning the defeated point, which is really, really good. It's a good rhetorical strategy, but he does this 3 or 4 times in the debate where he makes a joke about like, no, listen, I heard, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Do you think he realizes this? Yeah, I think with the way that he collects like certain pieces of data or specific points of information, I think he knows that he debates like this. Yeah. But
Destiny, in a moment of profound introspection, regaled his viewers with a post-mortem account of this cerebral jousting. He, with sagacious humility, confessed that grappling with AJW presented him with a conundrum of formidable proportions. Destiny, the paragon of erudition, discerned that AJW, while not a virtuoso in meticulous research, wielded a rhetorical rapier with finesse that belied his perceived knowledge base. Destiny's revelations unfurled like the intricate tendrils of a philosophical treatise, unveiling the labyrinthine layers of AJW's cunning stratagem. The crux of AJW's tactical masterstroke, as Destiny expounded, lay in the artful deployment of hyperpedantic minutiae. Rather than engaging in a frontal assault on the citadel of Destiny's arguments, AJW, like a wily tactician, diverted the discourse towards inconsequential byways. Destiny ruefully acknowledged that he, like a mariner ensnared in a sea of irrelevant minutiae, had failed to decipher the coordinates of AJW's strategic compass. Examples from the debate illuminated the subtleties of AJW's stratagem. In the realm of the Iranian nuclear deal, Destiny's lament echoed through the hallowed halls of reason. He elucidated how AJW, like a conjurer of obfuscation, diverted the discourse towards the security clearance woes of Robert Malley. Destiny, in hindsight, realized the mirage-like nature of this gambit, a mere dalliance with irrelevance, masquerading as a substantive rejoinder. The theater of immigration policy became another battleground where Destiny found himself ensnared in AJW's rhetorical snare. Destiny, wielding the cudgel of Trump's failures, was confounded by AJW's deft maneuvering. Instead of confronting the main arguments, AJW, with a virtuosity akin to a matador in the arena, brandished out-of-context statements and spurious immigration statistics. Destiny's frustration was palpable, akin to a maestro bewildered by a cacophony of misplaced notes. Destiny's autopsied analysis prescribed a sagacious remedy for future dialectical encounters. He conceded that a more surgical approach, dissecting arguments one by one, would have immunized him against the cunning ruses of AJW. The revelation of AJW's amiable demeanor and adept use of humor in the face of crumbling arguments underscored the psychological underpinnings of rhetorical warfare. In the crucible of verbal combat, Destiny, the intellectual gladiator, faced emotional tempests as fierce as the Mongol hordes sweeping across the steppes of his cognitive terrain. The realization that the battleground was not just an arena of ideas, but a psychological amphitheater left Destiny grappling with the ghosts of his intellectual adversaries. Like Caesar pondering the Rubicon, Destiny reflected on moments of frustration, each misstep a stone in the Sisyphean path of the debate. The weight of unforeseen rhetorical tactics bore down on him, reminiscent of Hannibal crossing the Alps with pachyderm cohorts, an unexpected and formidable challenge. The psychological impact, akin to the aftermath of the siege of Troy, left Destiny surveying the ruins of his arguments, each brick and mortar of logic now but fragments scattered on the plains of discourse. The emotional tumult within Destiny's intellectual citadel mirrored the fall of Constantinople, besieged not by cannons, but by the unanticipated fusillade of hyperpedantic minutiae. In the introspective chiaroscuro of post-debate analysis, Destiny grappled with the emotional aftershocks akin to a Byzantine theologian pondering the nature of divine mysteries. The proverbial inkwell of his emotions spilled onto the parchment of self-reflection, crafting a narrative as intricate as the Bayeux tapestry. To grasp Destiny's emotional odyssey is to navigate the labyrinthine catacombs of the human psyche, akin to deciphering ancient hieroglyphs etched on the walls of intellectual endeavor. Like Odysseus navigating the treacherous waters of the Sirens, Destiny sailed through the turbulent waves of debate, the emotional tempests threatening to cast him adrift. These intellectual skirmishes are not mere esoteric exercises, they are the bread and circuses of the digital agora. The audience, ever hungry for the spectacle of verbal gladiators, consumes these debates voraciously. The impact on public sentiment is akin to the seismic ripples caused by the fall of Troy, reverberating through the echo chambers of social media and beyond. To neglect the broader socio-political landscape is to traverse the Athenian agora without acknowledging the looming shadow of the Acropolis. These debates, with their Socratic undertones, illuminate the marketplace of ideas. They are the agora where citizens gather to scrutinize the philosophical wares on display, assessing the veracity of arguments and discerning the philosophers from the sophists. In the labyrinthine corridors of contemporary intellectual discourse, these debates are the Ariadne's thread, guiding us through the intricate maze of conflicting ideologies. The echoes of each argument linger, becoming the whispers of a modern-day oracle, influencing the direction of societal thought. Proverbs and idioms, those venerable sages of linguistic tradition, lend their wisdom to this discourse. As the saying goes, he who knows only his own side of the argument knows little of that. These encounters compel us to heed the admonition of the ages, reminding us that intellectual myopia begets a paucity of understanding. In conclusion, Destiny's Odyssey through the dialectical labyrinth with AJW serves as a didactic parable for aspiring polemicists. The tale implores us to navigate the churning seas of debate with discernment, avoiding the treacherous whirlpools of irrelevant minutiae. Destiny, ever the intellectual voyager, bids us to hoist the sails of meticulous argumentation and chart a course through the tempest of discourse, lest we be ensnared in the siren song of rhetorical sophistry.